In a statement to BuzzFeed, Jess Phillips reveals she'd like to prevent certain undesirable people from running for positions of power. This seems, to me, like a very dangerous road to start down, and looks surprisingly like another feminist attempt to grab more power on the grounds of being offended. You would have to live under a rock to not have noticed the ongoing battle between Sargon of Akkad and the media over the last couple of weeks. But let's have a quick rundown anyway for the rock dwellers among you. Since his announcement of running for MEP, the media have embarked upon a smear campaign of epic proportions against the man. Now, full disclosure, he is a friend of mine, as many of you know, so I either previously knew or have taken the time to discover the context of the accusations that have been made by these outlets. The media have taken multiple things out of context to paint him in a bad light, have used long debunked evidence, and even have gone as far as to stitch quotes together from different streams in different years in order to build their narrative. But one of the things that the media just cannot let go is his 4-year-old tweet to MP Jess Phillips, in which he states, "I wouldn't even rape you," to get her attention during an attempt by her to introduce internet censorship. They are of course trying to spin it as a veiled threat or a declaration that he's a rapist, but she's not attractive enough for a raping. The various versions of the spin on this tweet have been picked apart over and over by now, and you'll probably all know the arguments better than I do at this point, so we're not here to do that specifically today. But the fact remains that the words themselves, unspun by the media narrative, do say that he would not do it, which is why in one of his more recent videos on the subject, Sargon says this.
There's been an awful lot of talk about whether I would or would not even rape Jess Phillips. I've been in a lot of trouble for my hardline stance of not even raping her. I suppose with enough pressure I might cave. But let's be honest, nobody's got that much beer.
Now, anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together can see that this is obviously a poke at the media themselves, and at their overreaction to a 4-year-old statement of not wanting to rape someone, and the opposite of that being, well, wanting to. But of course BuzzFeed, in their infinite lack of self-awareness, despite being mentioned in the description of the video, took the obvious bait and ran with it. And in doing so, they decided once again to push this in Miss Phillips' face, pestering her for a quote on a video she probably never would have watched otherwise. Because despite what they tell us, their intention is not to protect Jess's feelings, it's to stir up trouble. And so I don't find myself surprised to find Jess on Twitter saying that she's tired of it and upset at being contacted over and over again over a 4-year-old tweet. She probably is indeed tired of having 4-year-old drama waved in her face constantly. But that is the media's doing, not Carl's. And while I can understand her frustration at having the media drag her into this over and over again, her latest statement to BuzzFeed really concerns me, particularly the part where she says, "The Electoral Commission surely should have standards about who can and can't stand for election. If Facebook and Twitter can ban these people for hate speech, how is it they are allowed to stand for election?" Excuse me? Now, before we continue, I will say that I can't find Jess saying this on any of her social media, so it must have been a direct statement to BuzzFeed. And there is of course the possibility that she has been misquoted here. However, given that Jess has since tweeted out this article without correction, it is pretty safe to say that she agrees with the sentiment. So let's recap here. A man who hasn't broken any laws, and has had no legal convictions brought against him, should be banned from standing for election on the grounds that the media printed some, mostly out of context statements, from him that you don't like. Does anyone else think that this is an incredibly dangerous proposition? Especially from someone who actually has the power to put it before government. If we set the bar for running for government to exclude anyone who has said something that the current establishment doesn't like, not broken any laws, not been convicted, but simply uttered the wrong words or opinions, how long before this is expanded to anyone who would oppose you? How long, Jess, until it's only a list of Labour MPs on the ballot? And what happens, Jess, when someone who dislikes what you have to say gets in and has the powers to prevent you from running? Perhaps one day laughing at the idea of male suicide will be enough to have this used against you.
Mr. Chairman, of the type of things that may, Mr. Chairman, of the type of things that may, Mr. Chairman, of the type of things that may.
Now, I do understand her frustration at the media attention that this has brought to her, but that does not give her the right to decide who can and can't stand for election, and to hand herself the potential power to crush her opposition before they even get the chance of a fair vote. And I find it very funny that some of her colleagues have done and said some horrible things, but not a peep about getting them removed from the running. Hell, Diana Abbott recently actually broke one of London's laws by drinking on the overground, but I bet Jess will still happily allow her to run next election. I wonder why that is. And of course, who comes out of the woodwork to show his solidarity with Miss Phillips but Jeremy Corbyn himself? And while it is hilarious to see Mr. Corbyn tweeting about Sargon, it's also terrifying to see him nodding his approval of Miss Phillips, given the statement we've just discussed, and the fact that Jess has threatened to stab the man, making it all the more likely that if we do find ourselves with a Labour government, we may find this being pushed through that any law-abiding citizen who upsets such a Labour government won't be able to run against them. And let's face it, that's probably a long list of people. If being deemed a racist, sexist, or Islamophobe is enough to have someone stripped of their right to run for an opposing party, given how liberally the likes of David Lammy, Jess Phillips and co. throw these labels around, that's going to cut out pretty much everyone that has ever disagreed with them. Meanwhile, breaking drinking laws, joking about stabbing Mr. Corbyn, and being labelled an anti-Semite are all just fine. Well, depending on whose side you're on. And let's entertain for a moment that she doesn't want to give herself the power to choose. And instead, as she mentions social media, she wants to make the high crime of being banned from Twitter the bar for being banned. Do we really want to hand Jack the power to remove people's right to run for elections in a country that he doesn't himself live in, with just the click of a button? I'm not sure which is more terrifying. Personally, I'd rather that we continue to be given all of the candidates, and if one of them has terrible and unpopular ideas, then let the public decide not to elect them. It certainly doesn't benefit us as the general public to have certain ideas taken off the table and candidates that we aren't allowed to vote for. But it does benefit people like Jess and Jeremy, who themselves spout some pretty bad ideas. By removing potential competition from the ballot, there is more chance of they themselves getting elected, especially if they can get this into electoral law for future general elections. So while I do believe that Jess is a little frustrated at the media storm, I think this idea of hinting that the Electoral Commission should prevent Carl from running is less about her being hurt by his words and more of an opportunity for self-gain. But let me know what you guys think, and I will see you soon.